I'm a born and bred New Zealander. I've spent more than 2 decades lobbying to have an end brought to the practice of deducting overseas contributory pensions from New Zealand superannuation entitlements. My lobbying efforts have failed dismally, and in 2014, in November of that year, I joined 15 other New Zealanders in lodging or filing a complaint with the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. Following an examination of a response from the New Zealand Crown, the United Nations dismissed our complaints. Eventually, through the Official Information Act, we were able to obtain a copy of the Crown's response, and I was dismayed to see at first reading that this was an attempt to deceive the United Nations and the world in the expectation that it would deter the United Nations from taking a closer look into New Zealand's retirement policies. A rebuttal was prepared with information that was gathered, going through the document point by point and exposing every claim made by the Crown as false. First of all, let me show you the document itself. Here's just the cover page. It's a 40-page document. There's a lot of legalese in there, but here's the first page. Rather than go through point by point the false claims made by the Crown to the world, I'd like to take 3 points. First of all, the use of Latin terms, none of which are contained in New Zealand's Dictionary of Legal Terms. The second point is the claim in here, and it's made more than once in the document, that New Zealand follows a policy of cost-sharing pensions with other countries. This is a completely false claim. The whole point of the direct deduction policy is to reduce the rate of New Zealand superannuation that is paid. If the overseas pension is greater than New Zealand superannuation, then the New Zealand government provides nothing in the way of income at all. Furthermore, from figures I obtained from the ministry more than a decade ago, I was informed that there were then 109,000 New Zealanders of retirement age who received nothing in the way of retirement income from the New Zealand government. Now that's a very serious claim to make to the United Nations, that New Zealand follows a policy of cost sharing. It just doesn't work. The next point I want to make is the various domestic remedies which the Crown claims were not followed by any of the persons complaining to the United Nations. That's completely false. I was able to obtain facts and figures going back 5 years from 2015, and let's look at the various domestic remedies. The first one is the Benefits Review Committee. People can appeal the direct deduction of overseas pensions by going through the Benefits Review Committee. The committee has 3 members appointed to it. 2 of them are ministry employees, so that the ministry immediately has a majority in any decisions. Furthermore, the ministry gave fake names to the members appointed to that committee, defying an injunction in doing so until it finally lost out in the High Courts. That means that for many of the cases heard by the Benefit Review Committee are legally not binding. Nevertheless, over a 5-year period of 143 cases that were heard by the Benefit Review Committee, these are cases appealing the direct deduction policy, of the 143 cases, the numbers of appeals that were successful, none. I repeat that, none. The next step, you can go to the Social Security Appeals Authority, provided you register an appeal within 3 months of being dismissed by the Benefit Review Committee level. If it's 1 day over the 3 months, no, you can't. The Appeals Authority is an independent tribunal. It has 4 members set up by the Governor-General with persons recommended by the Ministry of Social Development. So that tells you a lot right there. Anyway, over a 5-year period, the Appeals Authority heard 19 cases appealing against the direct deduction policy. The number of cases that were successful, None. It's interesting in this document, very revealing in fact, the use of the term capture. The government refers to its treatment of overseas pension as capturing them. Capturing is a synonym for seized. Anyway, let's continue. The next domestic remedy available to people in this country is the Human Rights Commission. In 2001, a moratorium was lifted on filing complaints against the government. Although the Human Rights Commission kept very quiet about it, over a period from 2001 to the present day, the Human Rights Commission received 31 complaints of pension injustice. The very first case, the Human Rights Commission turned over to the Ministry of Social Development to reply. The Ministry itself then contacted Crown Law to draft a reply, which then became the template for rejecting all further appeals. Every appeal was rejected. None were successful. Every appeal was stamped incompetence, in violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which New Zealand signed its agreement to in 1948. This is a gross violation, limiting the complainants from getting further advice. The Ministry wanted to keep its replies behind closed doors. There is one other step remaining for people to appeal the direct deduction policy, and that is to go through the court system. The first case in 1987 involved an American Social Security pension known as the Roe case, now in archives. The High Court has released the details of the files on that case, and we've been able to go through them with a fine-tooth comb. It was a gross miscarriage of justice on two major erroneous points of law. That became the basis for dismissing further cases in the High Court, with one exception. One did succeed, and that was in 2004, known as the St. Raj Rai case. That involved a Fijian civil servant's pension. The Crown's response makes a great issue of the fact that no complainant has ever gone through or gone to the Supreme Court, and that is absolutely correct. That was not a false claim. However, let's look at 2015. The maximum amount of superannuation paid to a pensioner was the single living alone supplement of $18,800 gross. Now, to afford to go to the Supreme Court, if he could, would take 5 years of his entire income. Then he comes up against Crown Law, which represents the Ministry of Social Development and any claims against the direct deduction policy, as they've done in the High Court and would do so again in the Supreme Court. In 2015, of the millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer funds provided to Crown Law set aside for solicitors' fees alone $33.4 million. Now, who could possibly expect to succeed in the Supreme Court when you come up against those sums of money? Nobody's gone through the Supreme Court. Nobody ever will about the direct deduction policy, and the answer is obvious. It's very chilling to realise that every domestic remedy, every avenue of appeal in this country has been very carefully blocked by both the Ministry of Social Development and Crown Law. This is a very disturbing factor of this case. Returning to this heinous document, let's scroll down to the second page and you'll see a subtitle which is going to appear on every other page throughout the rest of the document. It's my name, the Arneson Communication. This was done without my consultation. I knew nothing about it until I saw this document. I attempted to find out who was responsible for this, and so I wrote to our ambassador in Switzerland who delivered the document to the United Nations. Her name is Amanda Ellis. I wrote to her twice. She never replied. I wrote to then Social Development Minister Anne Tolley. I never had a reply from Anne Tolley, except her secretary wrote to me saying that any further copies of this document that were sent out, my name would be deleted. Other people trying to find out who was responsible for this document had better luck. They discovered that the document, at the request of the Ministry of Social Development, was prepared entirely by Crown Law. So Crown Law has a great responsibility for this lying to the United Nations. The document was then signed over by Minister of Social Development Anne Tolley. It's pretty shocking in that you would expect that any competent minister would have gone through this document very carefully before signing it, and surely she would have realised that this is a very flawed document. Apparently she did not do so. After Carmel Sapoloni became the latest social development minister, I wrote to her, and several others did likewise, alerting her to the mounting excesses committed by her department. They were exceeding her mandate, and there was a presumption of arrogance on the part of the leading executives that was totally unacceptable. In particular, I brought to her attention the blatant deception of the United Nations in order to protect or safeguard the ministry's right to continue pursuing the retirement savings of migrants when they became elderly. In the year to follow, apart from the resignation of the ministry's chief executive, Brendan Boyle, for reasons that are not quite clear, there's been no evidence of any culture change within the ministry. If anything, attitudes have worsened. In July of 2020, ahead of next year's elections, thankfully, the spousal provision will be discontinued. Despite the pledges of the three political parties in the current government to reform or repeal the direct deduction policy, the ministry has now made it very clear that it intends to continue capturing the overseas retirement savings of elderly migrants unabated. A few journalists have covered isolated cases of pension injustice. Regrettably, not a single journalist has ever investigated the deeper issues involved. In most developed countries, the availability of a document such as this one, the Crown's response to the UN, and the rebuttal proving it false, would make major headlines. In my opinion, those persons responsible for this document have committed a criminal offence. First and foremost would be the Chief Executive, Brendan Boyle, who authorised this document. Secondly, Crown Law, who prepared the document. And finally, the person who approved the document, signed it and forwarded it to the United Nations in Switzerland, none other than former Social Development Minister Anne Tolley. In New Zealand, we enjoy freedom of speech and a free press. Nevertheless, a complacent press is no better than a curbed press. If the nation continues to turn a blind eye towards a major government department's dishonesty and ruthlessness, bureaucratic wrongdoing will not only continue, but it will escalate. This is a matter that should be of concern to every New Zealander who values our system of democracy.